Hey, yo, what up? This is Stubborn Ahole, and this is part 3 of the music slash dubstep production video episode series things. Yeah, so this episode, we're going to cover the wobble and a little bit about some techniques I use with the wobble. So, show you a little preview of what we're working with. This is how we're working right here. Well, you get the gist of it, since my laptop doesn't feel like working right now. Okay, so first is first. I have two wobbles in this. I have like a high-pitched synth wobble, and I have a lower sound, a lower bassy wobble. Um, and here's a little trick that I use sometimes, depending on the song. Automation is obviously the way you want to go for a wobble. You want to use automation to make your wobbles change the LFO speed and make them go up and down, etc., things like that. But here's a little trick that I started using when I started producing in the beginning when I wasn't really well with automation. So it's a good trick for beginners, and it gives you the desired effect anyways, even though it may not be the best method. So what I do here is I pretty much make a wobble, and I have it sound exactly how I want it. I get it, the right stuff on it. Let's say, for example, let's turn this off. I'm focusing on that right now. So I get it sounding how I want it, meaning the EQ. This wobble, I want it to be really heavy on the bass. I mean, I want this thing to hit through the subs because I have no other bass besides this wobble. So I'm really going heavy on the bass because I just want that to shine. And I'm kind of taking out from the punch here so my kicks and snares can come through the mix and still provide their punches that they should be providing. And then on Ozone 5, since this is once again a bassy wobble, I'm running compression, but I'm also running a wider compressor that still lets the bass come through without hindering the bass. You gotta be careful because some of this compression, I mean, if you do it wrong, you're really gonna take the bass out. If you over compress it, you're gonna lose the bass. So yeah, besides that, I'm not running any stereo imaging because I want it to be, it's a mono track and I want it to be like just right there in the middle. And I have some harmonic exciter running just to give it a little fuzzy and more rough around the edges sound because we want it to be a little dirty since it's a wobbly. Anyway, so this is kind of what that sounds like. Okay, so here we go. Massive. I use some of my wobbles in Massive. A majority of them come from Massive, but I also like using Silent one or whatever, however you pronounce it. So this is a wobble I like to use a lot in a lot of my songs. It's kind of went with me over time and it's migrated, and I made a lot of changes to it here and there, and I use it a lot and I play with it. It really works for me because, I mean, you could pause this video and kind of look at the majority of the settings and copy this if you want. But what I do here is I have the LFO routed down here, so everything I can use in automation, but I'm just not going to for this track, just so I can kind of show you guys how you can do it without being automation experts. So right here under my LFO, you can see that I have it at 1 to 16. So that's a fairly fast wobble, as you can hear right here. Okay, so pretty much this is going to control the speed of the wobble. Whether you make it slow or super fast, that's going to make the wobble, how fast it's going to go. So instead of doing up some automation and whatever, what I'll do is I'll just create a duplicate track. And remember, these tutorials are designed to be on any DAW. So like, whether you're using Ableton or whatever, as long as you got VST supports, I mean, you can run these same VSTs. So I'm sure there's ways to duplicate the tracks in every other software as well. So you just duplicate the track. That's also another good habit to do because, once again, it's also going to keep, if it's the same instrument anyways, I duplicate the track because it's going to keep the same EQ settings and the same compression settings and everything. That way the sound is consistent. That way I don't got to worry about one song or one instrument being slightly EQ'd less than the other, and it's consistent. So I even label these accordingly. So that's my fast wobble. This is a mid wobble. So it's exactly the same instrument. The only difference is I go in here and I change the LFO a little slower. So this wobble is going to wobble slower. And I do the same thing again. I duplicate the track, go to massive, and then I change the speed of this one to a no wobble and pretty much just a sick bass line. So now I have 3 different wobbles, and they're all identical except the speed. One is fast, one is medium, and one is no wobble and just sick bass. And as you can see here, I just kind of have them, going back and forth a little. I have fast wobble, fast wobble, fast wobble, straight, fast wobble, fast wobble, fast wobble, straight, fast wobble, fast wobble, fast, 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 fast wobble, and then a little bit mid at the end to give it a little bit of a different sound that you haven't heard in the wobble, so it's not super repetitive through the whole sequence. So this is what it kind of sounds like. You get the sound of an automation, even though there's no automation. You get the wobble going back and forth, but there's no automation. I just used 3 different tracks and only changed the LFO speed on each track to make it sound like there's some automation going on when there's really not. So this is kind of how it sounds. Yep, so that's a little technique that I use. I don't use it very often anymore as you become more of an advanced producer. Automation is definitely the way to go, especially if you're doing live shows, because you can macro, your automation, your favorite automation, you can macro it to a MIDI keyboard or controller, and if you do the songs live, you could really kind of, do those things on the fly while you're performing live, and it's amazing. So that's obviously the way to go, but if, until you get to that level, this trick works, and it lets you use one sound and pretty much diversify it as you would with automation without using automation. So I'm going to cover automation and effects in a separate video, and I'm also going to cover mastering a little bit in a separate video. So there's going to be 2 more videos. This is halfway through the series. Okay, so everyone knows, anyone that Google's producing or whatever knows that, everyone says you pretty much need massive to do dubstep and whatever. And I don't believe that's true, because yes, massive is good and it produces a certain sound, but everyone should have their own sound, and everyone should, just because everyone's using a specific sound doesn't always mean that that's what you have to do. Or if everyone uses massive, that doesn't really mean what you have to do either. You can, that's the beauty of making music. It's like trying to tell a painter, hey, don't use those colors because, that's not the right color. That's just stupid. The whole point is expressing yourself and making it sound how you want it to sound. So another times when I use wobbles, I actually use just Silith, and I use a regular synth noise. So you get something like this. Let's see, I got some bass in there too. I got some more bass tracks in there since I'm using a synth wobble. These wobbles don't provide any bass because they're all mid to the high level. There's no bass in them, so I have another bass track link underneath so you don't lose. So I still have something else providing the bass with some high wobbles here and there. That's what that sounds like. So I'll go into that a little bit too. Basically, I use the same exact technique that I used in Massive with LFO. The only difference here is I use the agitator instead. So here I have the tracks named accordingly. This one's called 4 wobble because it's a slower speed. This one's 8 wobble, it's medium speed, and this one's a 16 wobbles. They're probably not perfect to what they should be named, but you get the point. One's slow, one's medium, one's fast. So inside the VST here, this is how this one sounds right here. I got this synth right here. This is a synth originally. That's kind of kind of a good sound that I really liked. So I wanted to give it kind of a wobble effect, and the agitator kind of gives it that same type of wobble. So it's not really a wobble per se, but it actually gives you the same effect. So turned on the agitator, slipped it to 1/8, and I turned the gate out all the way up, and now it sounds like this. And there you go. Just like that, you got that shit banged out. So that's the slow one. Just make another track. Once again, I EQ'd it, added any effects I wanted, compressed it. I added some stereo imaging because for my highs and my mids, I like to have some stereo panning a little bit and some stereo imaging just to have it shine through the speakers. And on a decent sound system, you'll be able to hear these little dynamics, and it sounds really cool. So, but besides that, typical stuff, EQing and some compression on it, and then a little stereo imaging. And the same thing, I use the same technique. So our slower one is agitated at 1/8. So the really fast one, she's agitated probably at like 16 or even 32. Yeah, it's 16T. I have it on T to give it a little bouncing effect, because listen to the difference. If you put it on 16, it's going to be a really consistent. If I put it on T, it's going to give it a little different effect. As you can hear, it gives it a little different effect. So I have that running on 16T. And then I just duplicate the track again. And then here, I have a regular 16. So that's the traditional one. The 16T gives it the faster, diverse one. And same thing. I go through here, and originally I had one MIDI pattern played out, where all these three tracks right here were all one track originally. So I took it and pieced it out, and I have one note hit on here now, and another note hit here, note in here. So it goes back and forth once again without automation. I just have three tracks that are agitated at different speeds, so you get an automated effect without having any automation. Yeah, and that's that shit right there. So combined, we got our first part of the track that has massive bass coming from a massive generated wobble, a lot of low end, no high end. Then you have a more party pumper part that has a more typical hip hop sounding bass with a really high pitched synth that's really crazy sounding and really fast sounding. This song is obviously not laid out correctly yet, but just for these tutorials you'll see. By the time we go into automation in the next video, you'll see how the track's going to be laid out. I'm going to have to lay it out properly and go to automation and some effects, some risers, some white noise, some builders, things like that to make your track transition smoother and really make the transitions and build-ups, things like that. I'm going to cover all that in the next video. So this is what we have so far if you're following those video tutorials. Boo hoo hoo. Anyway, I think you get the point because I've already played it like twice. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, hit me up. Stubborn ass.